Now, the secret to a good panel discussion is actually not to wait to be asked a question, really. And it's also about good disagreement with each other as well. So I want to encourage you to argue with each other, to interrupt each other, and go, no, I don't agree with that at all. And also, please. And basically, just as you would a normal conversation, don't wait for me to prompt you, or don't feel like you have to. But I wanted to ask, I want to start broad, and then come in, and then maybe go broad again. Max, so actually, what you mentioned in your start of the day, you mentioned the need for to develop a positive vision for AI. And I wanted to ask you and the panel, actually, why do we need an optimistic view of AI? Is this just wishful thinking? How is it that we'd like a positive view of this, or we want that to be true, or does it have more meaning than just we hope it's a positive view?
I would say it definitely has more meaning. Looking at all you awesome students here, I often get students coming into my office at MIT asking for career advice. And I always start by asking, where do you want to be in the future? And if all she can say is, oh, maybe I'll have cancer, maybe I'll get murdered. A terrible strategy for career planning. If all you think about is that, then you're just going to become a paranoid hypochondriac. You'll actually have a worse career that way. I want students and all of us to be on fire and be like, this is where we want to be. And then you can think about the challenges and how to avoid them, right? This sounds so self-evident, but then think about what happens every time we go to the movies or go online and look at something about the future. It's always dystopian. So I think we as a society make exactly that ridiculous mistake and almost put an equal sign between future and some kind of disaster or another, and it makes us very paralyzed and makes us fight with each other. So I think it's incredibly important that we articulate where we're trying to get to, not because we're naive and just the hope, but because if we can visualize where we're trying to get, we're more likely to actually get there. Because we have something to work towards, and we will have a shared vision where people will collaborate, to get that thing.
You look like you want to say something.
No.
No? At all?
I look like I agree, therefore I shouldn't talk.
Okay, fantastic. One of the other things, the other general things I wanted to ask the panel, from my point of view, not understanding as much as people in this room, is that, and you referred to us as meat, which I thought was an interesting way of putting it. So why are we trying to, and also we saw data on here about the number of, the amount of information that these models can process compared to the human brain as well, and how far short we were, but also how fast it was accelerating towards that number. And I'm wondering why we're trying to replicate how humans work. Why are we trying to replicate meat with silicon? Are we anthropomorphizing AI here? Or is this the right approach? Is it the only approach? Come on, Michele.
Can I disagree with the moderator directly?
Sorry?
Is my mic on?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
Sorry, I said, can I disagree with the moderator rather than with
Absolutely.
the panelists? Okay. I don't think we're trying to replicate human AI in the sense that even neural networks are mistakenly called neural networks to an extent. Our brain synapse is working a different way compared to artificial neural networks. So I don't think we're trying to mimic that model. We just found a model that works. We know how to scale it, especially in light of the talk I was giving today. And I don't think it's going to be the only way for us to progress. But definitely we are taking inspiration from what we know from human intelligence, and we're trying to expand it until it pays off. But we're not doing exactly the same, by far.
Are those comparisons useful then? When you're talking about the data what the brain can process as opposed to what the models can?
But we definitely know humans as well as we can, right? So the fact that we can take inspiration from processes that work and map them to how we train models. I don't know, I have the ideas of curriculum training, which is the same thing that you do when you try to teach a kid all the way to a high school or a university. That helps in machine learning. So some of these ideas, we carry them over to how we train artificial networks. Some others are completely different. Like,
Yeah, I
Max
will
first, then
disappoint
Vittorio.
you, Jeremy, by agreeing with Michele. Because I think
I'm honored, so. It's
just
so
like
good.
those of you who flew here, did you fly on a mechanical bird or
Yeah.
on an airplane? Right. There is a great TED talk with a mechanical bird. They finally figured out how to build one, but it took 100 years longer than the Wright brothers' first airplane because it was much harder. There was a much simpler way to build a flying machine, and I think it's going to be exactly the same with artificial general intelligence, that there are much simpler ways of building it than this way. And probably
Am I on?
yeah.
So actually, I want to slightly disagree with my colleague in the
Good.
part of, I agree that we are not trying to replicate, this function and how. We're trying to replicate some functions, and I agree we're not trying to replicate the how. But, the trend was, we know how, but we can't replicate it. But actually, at least in my limited studies, it's amazing how little we know how humans do it. I mean, once you really start to check into cognitive science and neuroscience, like, I read at least 3 books. Like, I recommend Donauer from Paris guy, a great guy. And it's really it's scary for me. I read these books and they are so excited. Oh, we finally cracked one of the secrets on how children figure out, this and that. And then you go like, really? You cracked that? Okay, we are far. So generally, we don't really know how it works well, but we know what makes us work well from outside. So which stages you should learn in which way. But exactly how the neural mechanisms behind are, we are still very far. Another reason not to try.
I wanted to ask about regulation, really, another broad topic, really, and legislation. One of the interesting areas that we know about government and and difficulties that government has in moving quickly, and one of the examples is obviously with autonomous driving. Some of the technology that's holding that back is not the technology itself, it's the legislation and regulation bringing in. If you look at what was brought in for drone technology, for example, the FAA in America were completely caught off guard regarding the technological advances of drones and had to hurry through it took them years, but had to hurry through regulation that was completely inept regarding that sort of technology. I think they eventually came up after about 3 years with, okay, people over the age of 16 with a drone over a certain size have to register it, and that was the best way they could actually do it. So when we're talking about these fundamental questions of the advances of AI and machine learning, and you've all proved how fast it's actually moving, how can legislation and regulation keep pace? I'm going to ask someone who hasn't spoken yet.
Can't.
It can't.
I was at the summer school just a couple of weeks ago on medical topics, and the problem is that really there were people, lawyers, and they have, I don't know how to say that, without being, but they are far away from what's the technology behind nowadays AI. So they are discussing more and more mechanisms, for example, to handle responsibility that are just impossible to apply. So the point is, for example, this is the problem that was discussed in this summer school. If a doctor, medical, takes a decision based on input on an AI, and this decision causes a damage to a patient, who is going to be all the responsibility for that? So I think the obvious question, I don't know, my answer would be the doctor, because what can you do? It's just another tool. In my humble opinion as an engineer, so you are given a tool, you are using it, and that's your responsibility how to use it. You are not bound to say what the AI is saying. But people that are different background from me, so lawyers that were present at this panel, they mentioned that no, we should split responsibility throughout the whole chain that has brought to the development of that AI. So who is the company releasing the software? Who has designed the model, who has trained it, who has fine-tuned it, who has installed it. And then we can say it's 10% here, 5% here, 10% here. Okay, so I don't think this is feasible. I think that there's a big gap between how these new technologies, AI technologies, are perceived from people who have not a technical background and from us that a bit understand how things. So I think it's a very big problem, and I see a huge gap between the people that are in charge of developing and ruling the things.
Federico, you want to say something?
Yeah, I think is it working? Yes. I think one of the key components that we need in order to have sensible regulations like explainability, right? If we are unable to explain why, the models take some decision, then it's also nearly impossible to decide who is accountable for that, right? Because you can't say who took the decision and why, right? So,
yes, I was just to interrupt you. The people there, medical, they say, okay, AI applied to medicine must be only explainable.
yeah, exactly.
Otherwise, you can't apply it. So it must be decision trees, because that's the example that was given, because you know the path.
Well,
so, but then it can work well enough. Sorry for interrupting.
No worries.
While we're talking to you, Luigi, I'm actually interested to know about another question. So with not all, but most of the recent breakthroughs coming from private companies, due to the larger resources that they can draw upon, what role does academia, does university play in shaping the future of AI?
Okay, so we have 25 GPUs in our lab, so that's what we can do. So I think that our role, but then I must be critic. I think that our role should be more on trying to address these foundational topics that we are discussing. For example, does really AI need so much data? Has to be so compute and data hungry? Is that the real? We all agree that the human brain doesn't work like that, so there must be other mechanisms to learn which are more data and compute efficient. So we should work on that, theoretically, but we don't do that. We just try to do the play and compete with Vittorio and Google and Meta on the race for performance, because it's easier in a way, and I'm not saying that researchers in private companies are not working on foundational topics. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that we probably should have the courage to work more on this topic. Why we are not doing that? We are trying to compete on the same battlefield. But the problem is that it's in nowadays conferences it's hard to get rewards, publication, for papers that are maybe just novel idea that cannot prove state-of-the-art performance. So we don't do that, but we probably should have the courage to do that and advocate more space for this kind of low performance but new idea papers.
Georgia, you wanted to say, and then Vittorio.
Yeah, I think I wanted to add to the question about the role of academia in the current landscape of research. And I wanted to say two things. The first is AlexNet was done in academia, NERF was done in academia. Two big innovations in the last 15 years. So this gets to tell you how the freedom and creativity that's happening in academia is going to be the driving force in the future. And second of all, yes, there are problems that will not be possible in academia. Palm cannot be trained in academia. We need to come to that realization. That's fine. But this is training large-scale models with billion parameters on millions of data is not the only thing. There's a lot more tasks to solve. We want to get to AGI, but we're not there. Sorry if that, we're very far from that in my opinion. The tasks that we can do right now are very limited. We are getting better at some, but there is so much more to do. And with the big focus right now and the resources that industry is putting behind training large models, and I'm not just talking resources in compute, I'm also talking about the people. It takes a village to make a lot of these things happen. There is room in other places to innovate, and that will happen in academia. It has happened in academia. So, it's all
Victoria first, sorry.
So actually, I'm really happy because half my answer, like,
Georgia did it.
actually is perfect. So let's go to the corner cases Georgia raised: palm, flamingo, all the other animals at DeepMind, chinchilla and company. Sure, academia can train that. And I wonder, one answer is, well, there's plenty of other things that can be done in academia that are equally important or more, agreed? But also, we could also think to change the computational model. That's a proposal that I'm thinking for a few months. Now the model is, yes, the industry has this giant cluster, every academic has their own local cluster, and they don't manage. But in physics, they solve that, if I can dare to borrow from Large Hadron Collider, before that, the smaller colliders, CERN and all that. They agreed to pool their resources. The governments, I equate governments in academia a little bit, fundamental research that wouldn't be paid by industry. They agreed to pool the resources, build a crazy one facility, and then people queue up for experiments. If they want to do it, they announce themselves, they wait a few months, and then why not with computing power for training Palm, training, maybe we should call it I don't know, the League of European or American University could have a giant cluster, really. We talk about million GPU cores, similar to the Large Hadron Collider. I think this is not beyond the level of organization we can reach. We have a European Union. In the US, there is a National Science Foundation. That would be a fun project. Not that I'm willing to run it, just saying.
Can I defend myself a second? Good. Oh, you want to go ahead, Max?
Max was next.
Let's hear from an actual physicist.
Oh. Max, then Michele.
I think academia's greatest role comes in doing the valuable things which it makes no financial sense for private industry to do. Private companies have an incentive on doing things, developing things where they can own the IP and then make money off of it, like train up Google Palm and then not share it with anybody, right? Two great examples of this is train up awesome people like you students, right? It doesn't make sense for Google to do that because they can't chain you to your desk and prevent you from going and working for another company right after they educated you for 4 years. So obviously it's great that academia generates all this talent. And that's going to continue happening by governments supporting university education, I think, not abdicating it to industry. And the second example is research breakthroughs that have to do with safety and things like this, where you don't want any company to have a patent on the safety method so other companies can't use it. You want it to be developed in a university, open sourced, so all the companies around the world end up using it and having safer AI.
Michele.
Right, so I wanted to mention a couple of things about Palm because it has been mentioned several times.
No, this was just...
No, again. No hit yet. First thing is, as you recall from my talk, I tried to give a few pointers of research that can be done in academia, regardless. So in a sense, there is a way to coexist between academia and industry research. That's why also we onboard a lot of PhD residents. We are like 10, 20 right now just in my team. Other thing I wanted to mention, there is Bloom, which is a very large model that has been trained collaboratively across different academic institutions. It's size-wise is similar to OpenAI GPT-3. So let's say the gap is a couple of years between something that happens inside the industry and something that will happen in the open source world. I know it's far from being ideal. It doesn't take a day, but it doesn't take a decade. So these models are actually available online to be used. And last thing, I also mentioned this during the talk, there is Hugging Face, which is a very interesting portal for models that are available. And it's a collection of several of these models came from the industry, have been developed there, and now they're available open source for everyone to use, including academics. So the half-filled part of the glass is, yes, something happens before in industry, but then the overflow to academia happens regardless. And I think it's a net benefit at the end of the day.
Federico.
Yeah, no, I agree on computational resources. I think like university maybe can focus on different problems, still have an impact. I have to say, though, that I've seen, like, corporate is draining somehow human resources from academia, right? I've seen, like, many friends, they became professors, right? After 2-3 years, either leave of absence or they left academia. I don't know, I'm not referring to anybody in the panel. No, I'm not looking to, were you in academia?
I'm sorry, say it again?
Were you in academia?
I'm headed there.
Oh, you're going to? Sorry,
Yeah.
you're on the opposite path. Okay. Yeah, anyway, I experienced like some friends, right? A lot of them that I knew, like moving after 2-3 years, right, from professorship back into corporate, right? So that was kind of like.
But I think in Georgia is the opposite, right? She was in
For
corporate.
Georgia, it's the opposite.
So
That's
it does
amazing.
happen that sometimes corporate trains the academics.
It does, but yeah.
Okay. Alex, I'm going to pick on you because you've tried to not answer anything there and try to keep out of my line of sight. Yeah, I've noticed, believe me. I can even invite the audience to ask
Nice.
questions. Well, I will do, but I'm going to ask you something first, sir. There's a couple of things. Well, I was interested in what you were saying about the data forecasting moves, and I wanted to ask you how many moves ahead can you do? And can your system chain reactions? You mentioned 5 seconds, but when a human makes their way through a crowd, they're not looking at the person in front of them. They're normally looking at spaces 5-10 meters ahead, and subconsciously you're making a path, and it's not about that. It's almost subconscious, that first position. So does your model try and emulate that? Are you chaining moves, or is it just one move and then on to the next move and then on to the next move?
No, we try to predict at any time scale. So the next millisecond, the next 5 seconds, but also your final goal. So at all scale, we try to develop models that will succeed in forecasting what we do. And I don't think you can hear me.
Is Alex's mic on? Can everyone hear Alex? Yes or no?
No?
No.
1, 2. Hello, everyone.
Can we turn Alex's mic on? You've got to talk a minute, Alex, I'm afraid. Your worst night. There we go.
Can you hear me? Yes? Awesome.
Okay.
So I said that, yes, we are trying to forecast the next millisecond, the next 5 seconds, but also your final goal. And sometimes by first trying to forecast the final goal, it helps to forecast the next 2 or 5 seconds. And to also answer your question about academia, in the industry of self-driving car, a lot of people ask me, how are you competitive with all the industry players? And it turns out that they're quite behind. They actually come to us, so they feed our research, and they apply it and try to scale it in their own way, given their business. So in fact, I'm confident to share that academia is leading. And the few companies that are also leading are directed by faculties. So they have a joint position. They're also in academia. And if you also look at all the breakthrough that you mentioned, there are a lot of faculties involved within the industry. It's just that they have different resources and they take advantage of it.
Before I come to the audience, I'm going to ask you in a minute if anyone's got any questions. We're not coming to the end here, but I've got loads of questions, and so I'm just going to keep going through them and forget about it. Yes, sir, you actually wanted to ask a question, didn't you, earlier? I've got it here, but you ask it. It's better if you ask it.
It's for Michele. When I saw your slides on the performances and how Palm on 540 billion parameters happened to overcome the average human, I asked myself a question. How do you measure the average human? What was the pool of the average humans, best humans? How did you measure it? The ages, the ethnicity, stuff like that.
All right, I'm not the best person to answer this question, unfortunately, because we took that benchmark from the paper I have on the slides. So I would recommend you to check the Big Bench paper that explains in detail how they've done it. I can tell you for a fact that they took care a lot about, segmenting the population in the correct way and making sure that the pool is as representative as it gets. And also, we're not talking about, primary school students. We're still talking about people that are educated. So the spread between the best possible annotator and the worst one is not that wide. But still, on the harder task, there is quite a lot of gap regardless. Because some of these special logical deduction tasks are quite hard. And not everyone excels at them, even humans.
Did you want to follow up?
Yeah, just so it kind of an IQ test to measure the things.
They don't submit IQ test, of course, because it's not the right way to judge human intellect, but
Yes.
it's a good proxy measure to that, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
We can chat about it offline.
I think we had a question over here. Someone was, yeah.
I think releasing code and data can greatly benefit future work with a nice combination of academia and industry. What are your opinions on releasing code and data?
What was the question?
On releasing what?
What do you think about releasing code and data?
Releasing?
Oh, releasing? Oh,
Releasing, giving away
that
code.
should be the only
It must,
option.
it's the only option.
The only option.
Hashtag open science.
As one that built a ton of data sets in his life, yes, release code and data. Perhaps not when it's proprietary, but otherwise, as much as you can.
Unless you want to be fired then.
Yeah. But otherwise,
I mean, it depends what the
Well,
code and
well, I just want to say that the problem with being in a large community like AI and machine learning, where you have tens of thousands of people, you have 2,000 papers every conference cycle, is the review process cannot possibly check reproducibility. We need to come to terms with the fact that this is not a guaranteed when a paper gets accepted. The only way to enforce or verify reproducibility is through releasing code and models, and you should be incentivized to do this because this is the only way your work will be used and advanced. So a lot of benefits. Yes, there's roadblocks with proprietary data. But my opinion is that you can always find a way to release a subset that isn't proprietary, or there is always solutions.
Max, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea to release code and data in general, unless it's for some reason very dangerous. So you may have seen this recent chemistry AI, which set out to discover certain classes of molecules, and it discovered all these chemical weapons all by itself. So that's probably not the first thing you should put on GitHub.
Not in this very moment.
Maybe if I can add something. I mean, it's also related to the field. I'm at the intersection of two fields, but deep learning, if you have trained one neural network, you will realize that we might not get the same result. So there's no way that we can trust result without having access to your code. So when you share numbers, and if you don't provide the code, we have zero trust. There are other fields that by just sharing the equation, we can trust you and we can do the math and it works. But in machine learning and deep learning nowadays, without having the code, I reject all the papers. I don't trust the numbers.
whoa.
Victoria.
So I would totally agree, and I spent a lot of my life building data sets, open images and all, but I would like to add a corner, a self-centered, egoistic corner, because I see our audience is also quite young sometimes. One day, we will come that day, if you're good. Somebody will ask, what was your impact on the field? And they come up with some metric. It might be citations, H index, how many grants you got, how many letters from Stanford and company you have. But I can promise you, if people don't read your papers, or they read them and don't use the content, and how do you get your content used? Well, by giving it to others. It's a necessary, non-sufficient condition. So hashtag open science and hashtag good careers, release your code and data.
Hashtag, are you releasing the data from Google?
Well, we released 50 million images already. The Google Maps, unfortunately.
Did you have a question, sir?
So each one of you is focusing on its own specific fields, and the models that you develop, it's for their purpose. But for example, Palm is not only a language translation model, and autonomous vehicles don't only study autonomous vehicles, they only do image processing, social interaction, or whatever. So talking about the general picture, AGI, and whatever, is there space for combining those modules? Because they look interdisciplinary a lot.
There is, of course, there is Flamingo from DeepMind, for example, which is one of the first efforts focused exactly on what you just explained. So combining several multimodal models for the sake of building possibly a version 0.1 of AGI. It's very far away from what is considered AGI, but it's a first step at showing how much these models can help each other towards a unified goal. I don't know if it's going to be the way that is going to lead us to AGI, but it's definitely a cool idea that has been published 3 months ago, perhaps. So you're right on time.
Anyone other questions? Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
Now, building on this question, I'm curious if all of you in this panel believe in AGI, and what is your take on what may lead us towards AGI? Is it scaling laws? Is it continual learning, multimodal learning plus multitasking? What do you think? And
Who'd like to tackle that?
I think the scaling laws, if you just extrapolate them, that puts kind of an upper bound on how long maybe it'll take to get there. We can probably get there a lot sooner by doing something less dumb than just taking exactly the same architectures and scaling them up, right? If you look at yourself, when you figure something out, right? Once you have one insight, you'll often change a lot the process for how you take the next step and so on. And I think it's my own personal guess is that we can learn a lot about the path to AGI by thinking more about what's special about human intelligence. You know, who has a cat or a dog, for example? Raise your hand. So we often mistakenly think of neural networks as the new modern kind of AI, and we think of the old logic-based stuff and Deep Blue as kind of the old-fashioned. But your cats and dogs, right? They have great neural networks. They're just as good at face recognition and things like this as we are. It's not that which makes humans more powerful on the planet than cats, right? What seems so unique about human intelligence is that we both have the ability that cats and dogs have with our neural networks to get quick intuitive understanding and so on. And also the ability to do logic-based symbolic reasoning, which is why we're speaking in symbols now in English, right? And why you often do math when you work. And we seem to have this ability to combine the two also in a way that neither our computers today nor our cats and dogs can do. We gain intuition first from our neural networks, and then we find a way of extracting the knowledge into symbolic form. And so I think in that broad area of basically symbolic AI merging in some clever way with neural networks is where I feel is the quickest path to AGI.
Can I also offer an opinion, or maybe a question? I don't think that we as a community have set up the right tasks to even test AGI yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So maybe there is a model, we don't know. And all these papers that are, DeepMind, Meta, academia, they're only scratching the surface of tests. They're either on synthetic tasks, not useful, not necessarily transferable. So we are definitely lacking tasks, and especially computer vision. I think language is doing much better because of the form of their data. It's much more flexible. It's a lot less redundant, so they can solve a lot more tasks. But computer vision is lacking in the diversity of tasks. ImageNet is not an intelligent task. Okay.
that was my next question. Like, how do you know when you are there? Like, how do you define understanding? Because what you are aiming for is for the network to understand the model, but how do we define understanding?
Is a question for me? Sorry, I didn't.
Who are you asking?
Everyone, right?
Everyone?
Everyone, okay. Anyone want to take that first? No?
Oh, so the question is, how do we define understanding?
Yeah.
I don't have an answer to that.
That's why we passed the ball to you. Take the output.
Okay.
So the best that we all can do is, and I am firm believer in ever-evolving benchmarks, set up good benchmarks to test and push forward. And benchmarks are a blessing and a curse. They need to evolve. Nothing can be static. That's why we need to ditch ImageNet and move to other ones, because we are overfitting and we know. But we need to push to more and more complex tasks. And that is one way of quantifying progress. And I want to say something that I think we have known as scientists many years, and it's great to see also the CEOs take on that, and Demis Hassabis has said this recently, is that having benchmarks and metrics is important, and that's where I want to leave it.
I totally agree, and I think I can comment on the natural language side. I think for decades we thought of the Turing test as the benchmark to figure out if we were close to AGI, and then we started to see several different systems that can actually fool a person to believe that they're having a conversation with another human being. And that just told us that the Turing test was not the correct test.
Yeah.
And we started to have several more advanced benchmarks, such as the one I was showing today. So for me, the new Turing test is Big Bench. And maybe in 3 years, when we're going to plateau there will be the new version of that. So we have to move the goalpost ahead every time we get close to plateauing. And I don't know how many iterations we're going to need until we reach what we consider AGI. But at least we know how to make progress.
What's interesting, actually, from what you're saying, and what Max was saying about this different way that the human brain reasons, and that's what makes us special, is that it brings us back to this idea of what you touched upon in your talk, Michele, which was, are we at a point? How soon are we at a point where this sort of technology would actually replace, the need for developers? And I would actually bring you in on this as well, Federico, as well, where this idea where you text input for, and that, what I call in the journalism point of view, this idea of low code or no code, where the machine actually does the work for you, and you just have to be there to tell it what to do. But at what point do you see, if at all, where a lot of that work is literally taken over by the computer?
So first of all, I believe in the concept of no code. I don't believe in low code, and I will explain why. So no code, it's a niche that makes a lot of sense. Sorry for the feedback, not my fault. And it's all about empowering people that don't want to write a single line of code. Low code instead is the target of every good software engineer, in the sense that we all want to write the least possible amount of code in exchange of getting the behavior that is intended. So until there will be a new level of abstraction that allows us to write less code, then no AI will be capable of reaching or designing this new level until we actually have AGI. So in the last 5 decades, we always came up with a new level. We started from assembly, then we wrote C, then we went up, we started to use libraries and frameworks and so forth. There is, of course, something on top of what we have today, and this is not something that a model will design for us. There will be humans coming up with the next way of writing code. And if we expect that to come from an AI, to me that is equivalent to AGI. So we reach a level of intelligence that allows us not only to replace soft coders, but also software architects. How far that is away, I'm not going to make any estimate because I'm going to be wrong. So you're asking too much. But we're bound to make that happen. Of this, I'm sure. Perhaps, as Max said, when I'm alive.
Federico, this is obviously something that you deal with every day. Sort of like, parts of your job are augmented by this sort of technology and made easier. And do you see that as ever be the path to being just even better and better and better, or do you see some things you're wary of?
So if I talk about the technology that we're using to develop digital content, then I think it's getting better and better, and I think it's going to, and I think now we're at a point where it can actually be productized and used by artists and digital artists, etc., media content creators. And so I think it's going to be quite disruptive for their workflow. So I expect several changes in the future. It's not just the AI, of course, it's also the software that they're using. So we have also to see how long it will take to be packed into a software that they can use that gives them enough control and versatility, right? So that might be a blocker because maybe, the big companies that work on editing software don't actually own the technology, which is owned by other companies. So we need to see that, how it's going to unveil, let's say. But I do feel like in 5 years, it's going to be quite different from now. The way,
Because I'm wondering, like, it wasn't that long ago where OpenAI showed their demonstration of you just had to talk to their model to program a very rudimentary game, and it wrote the code live as you were speaking to it. I also remember, and some of you may remember, back in 2016 at TechCrunch live on stage, the guys who invented Siri then invented Viv, and that demonstration was they were just talking to their phone and asking it complex questions that your phone cannot answer now. I remember the question was, will it be colder than 5 degrees in the Golden Gate Bridge area the weekend after Labor Day, or the day after tomorrow? And it got that right. And then it said, can you book me the next question was, can you book me a 4-star hotel room in the Monterey Bay area the weekend after Labor Day? And it did. And then Samsung comes and buys Viv, and we never hear from it again. So where is this technology? 2016, that was a live demonstration on stage. No text input needed, no knowledge of coding needed, just speaking into your phone. It's now 8 years later.
I think Georgia had the best answer.
No,
sorry. In the sense that during her talk, she said almost everything about AI is in reality engineering. So there is a big gap between a demo and actually roll something into production. So there is a lot of effort to make that happen. So building a demo is relatively simple. Making it work at scale is a completely different deal. So that's why several years have passed and you still don't have it as a product.
Sorry.
So, I would like to add, you're right, Michele. Assuming the technology would work in a general sense, then you still need all those years to scale it. But there is also another type of difference between a demo and working, is working in a general sense. I can write right now one 10,000 category recognition engine with 0 lines of code, with 0 looking at the pixels. You give me the image and I throw a random label out of the 10,000. And then on the image it works, I show it to you. Look at the demo. So of course I'm not saying there are shades, right? But it's like a thickness in probability space, how close you are to solving the task. And by showing examples, the demos equivalent are a figure in a paper, you can always fool people into thinking it works much better. That's why we have benchmarks that have been designed not by the person who's trying to beat the benchmark, otherwise it doesn't work. So in this case, I'm not quite sure about that particular demo, but it could have been that it only works in a few scenarios and not truly in general.
And by the way, the demo in 2016 was mind-blowing.
Yeah.
The level of natural language understanding, even if it was a small example, was still mind-blowing.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm waiting for it anyway. I've got 2 more questions. Okay, here we go. We're running out of time, guys. If you're going to ask questions, you're going to ask them. Yes, sir. Can we turn that mic on?
Okay, thank you. I had a question more aimed towards Max. I really enjoyed your talk, and there was a slide that was the red and the green that showed what was good and bad. And we had to steer towards the good, obviously. But I think if you really look at the history of humans, it's only been a small amount of time since there hasn't been any war between us. And these wars start by objective truths that we believe we need to kill another person because we truly believe it. So do you believe that, just in terms of safety, that first, does objective truth exist, and can we encode it into a network so it will make it even more safe that no one can change the network? So
can you repeat the last part? I got the first part, how you said there have always been wars, et cetera, but then the last part.
Because these wars started because we truly believe if objective truth exists, then killing is not bad, and we can't ever. But for certain, if you have an enemy, like for example, what's even going on in Ukraine right now, we truly, in the West, we truly believe objectively that this is bad. But in the East and Putin's regime, they believe objectively that this is good. So how can we objectively make neural networks believe that killing is bad, and so it can never be used for bad intention?
Great question. You know, I think first of all, it's very important to not conflate intelligence with ethics. They're two very, very different things. If Hitler had been much more intelligent, I don't think that would have been better for the world. In fact, it would probably have been worse for the world, right? He would have accomplished his goals better. If all we do is keep having wars indefinitely between countries and we just make ever more powerful weapons, of course, eventually we're going to have so powerful weapons that we're somehow, at some point, all going to die, right? We've already come very close to having an accidental nuclear war many times, and we would just come in the situation we would be in if you go into an Italian kindergarten and give the kids, say, here's a box of hand grenades, why don't you have fun play with these, you know? We don't want to put humanity in that situation where we have more power than wisdom. I think, so I'm more optimistic than that. I don't think we're doomed, because I think when the technology gets powerful enough, it can't only destroy us, but it can also make us all vastly richer and better off. And when we see that, there is much more incentive for collaboration. So I don't think there is any future where China wins and America loses, or where America wins and China loses. There are only two futures. One where both China and America lose, and one where both China and America wins. You know, like Sweden and Denmark, we had wars and wars and wars for hundreds of years. Sometimes Denmark got a little bigger, sometimes Sweden got a little bit bigger. It was a zero-sum game. Then we haven't had any wars in Sweden for 200 years, and now Sweden and Denmark are both much richer. Why? Technology, right? This is the positive future I see for our planet as well. This is not a zero-sum game. That's the first question you asked us about positive visions, right? This is the message that so many leaders aren't getting, that we can all win this together if we steer our technology in the right direction. And this is an optimistic thing to say here at the end of the day also, because again, people talk so much more about all the problems that could happen.
You're preempting me, I'm going to ask.
Then they talk about curing cancer, then they talk about lifting everybody out of poverty, and all of the awesome stuff that we can do if we collaborate on AI.
Well, this is one thing I wanted to ask you all, actually, or maybe start with you, Max, actually, but this idea, because ethics has come up a few times today. And I've been to a lot of these events where people talk about ethics, and it gets talked about, but never in detail. It always gets sort of glanced over. Yeah. So we need to combat the ethics problem, and then no one goes any further. And part of the reason I heard someone really explain was that, obviously, we've had thousands of years to hone our consciences and our ethical frameworks and what we actually do. And this is what makes us feel what's right and wrong. And it's taken us thousands of years to get to where we're at now. And the problem is how do you instill that thousands of years of knowledge into some sort of software, some sort of algorithmic framework that can then be interpreted? And someone used the word trust earlier, trusted by humans, because and also we were talking about control at the time. If you 100% control something, there is no need for trust. So this is the thing I'm asking you really, is who is working at the moment on trying to distill those thousands of years of complex human behavioral knowledge into something that can be fed into an AI?
There is a small but non-negligible group of people working in artificial ethics and preference aggregation, and first on the question of how do you encode in the first place an ethical framework in a machine-readable form, and second, how do you extract it from humanity. But I think it's unsolved still, but I'm hopeful about that. I think the bigger problem is actually not that we don't know roughly what we want, because you come here from many different countries. It was such a pleasure during the coffee break to see how diverse you are in your geographic origin. And so whether you grew up in Lithuania or China or Sweden or Italy, people mostly kind of want the same thing, right? They want to be healthy, they want love, they want family, they want to do something meaningful. They would prefer not to get a nuclear weapon dropped on their head. They would prefer to avoid various kind of calamities. The United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, right? It's not like there's any great controversy about whether we should reduce poverty or not. Yeah, exactly. But I think the big challenge is, unfortunately, a lot of the leaders on of this planet are stuck with this sort of ape mentality that there's a zero-sum game and you have to go take the other person's thing and whack them with an even bigger club. When, as a matter of fact, that's not the situation that we're in anymore. It would be so easy to envision a future where just all countries that are on Earth get much better off, at the same time.
But isn't the problem with, I mean, yes, I agree with you that, yes, it's the, the obvious things of like, yes, killing people is bad, charity is good, that's right, but that's not where the issues are. The issues are in the nuances, the bits where sometimes it's good to be bad, for example, those sorts of areas where it becomes far more complex, rather than, yes, we don't want a nuclear bomb dropped on our head, of course.
I feel when we read the newspaper, the vast majority of the information we're being fed is information that is supposed to make us hate somebody or another. Maybe another country, it changes a bit from decade to decade, which the country is we're supposed to hate, or another group of people in our country we're supposed to hate. And sometimes it's partly just because that makes us click more, and so it's, keeps us engaged on social media. Sometimes maybe there are weapons manufacturers who want to make us hate someone so they can sell more product. But there's a lot of effort, I think, to constantly make us hate each other across the planet. And if we could just take a step back a little bit, the way astronauts do when they look down from the International Space Station, and realize that actually we humans have much more in common than we have that divides us. And we're in this together, and we're either all going to wipe out together, or we're going to have a really amazing future. And it sounds very tacky to say we need more love, less hate, but I think very, very concretely, if we actually get down to what it is that people in different countries ultimately really, really want, these are actually things that everybody could kind of have at the same time. Not impossible at all.
I want to end with continuing this positive theme rather than be negative. I'd like you all, if you wouldn't mind, and it's a hard question, I'm afraid, but I'd basically like you to end with a positive prediction for the next 2 or 3 years, really, of whatever field you want to be, whether your field or something else, but whatever you're working in. We've had a marvelous display of how things have come along very quickly in the last few years. I'm asking you to look forward another 2 or 3 years as well. Georgia, if I could start with you.
In the 5-year time span?
Or 2 or 3.
Okay.
5 is very hard.
I mean, I am mostly positive. And there are 2 directions that I think are very positive about. One is AI for science. It's growing. It's being invested on heavily, and I think we're going to see breakthroughs from that. That can be things like finding a vaccine much faster. That's very. We had this issue with COVID. It took some time. We want it to be shorter, and that will probably happen. And the second is developing technology that can help people. I think that we'll see that happening more and more and being used for good purposes.
Thank you. Thank you. Alex.
I'm actually extremely happy that AI is being studied by almost everyone, both industry and academia, and we need everyone to be involved. And even the industry is following this open science initiative, so that's fantastic. And everyone is also considering the ethical impact as your last questions. And I'm very optimistic that we will make these things happen and hopefully respecting humanity in the process.
We're going to have autonomous cars in the next 5 years, Alex? I've been promised this for so many years. I can't.
Do you want to invest in some?
No,
stock
I
option?
just want to know whether they're
I can
actually
tell
going
you
to
which one to
appear.
invest.
Are they actually going to appear? That's what I'm asking, really.
My answer is they're already there. I mean, there are some autonomous vehicles in well-defined environments, so it's not anymore a question about the future. It's just that we are trying to make them more common, increase their field of application.
Vittorio, thank you. Vittorio, your positive prediction.
Positive prediction on something very technical and a bit narrower. You know, so because you were going a bit John Lennon-ish, I'm going to take another piece of John Lennon. So, but, like one model, at least for all of computer vision. Ideally, also multimodal text, language, image generation. These things are coming. DeepMind even has a model that plays video games and does some vision. It's a bit weird. But one model architecture trained once, no matter how many GPUs, the Large Hadron Collider come in, that solves at the upper envelope of the state-of-the-art of all the individual models specialized. We are having there, I can see the trend already since 5 years. There are fewer and fewer architecture modules. Now it's all a transformer. But still we have specialized losses, specialized pieces, and if you try to make a unified one, it works half as good. This goes beyond saying multitask learning. It goes to the point of one unified model solving all the tasks, upper envelope, so that we can look at how it's built and try to steer deeper into the heart of AI as a constructive proof. I think we're getting there, maybe 10 years.
Oh, okay. That's a cheat. That's a cheat. Michele.
All right, so I'm going to do a technical prediction and one more in general about the field. I'm optimistic about IDEs changing completely. So the environment we used to write code in 3 to 5 years will look something that we can't imagine today. And it will make us much more productive. So that is my technical prediction. The other one about the field is piggyback into what Alexander was talking about. I see AI as a force for good, in the sense that this field is cutting across several different countries. And it's really bringing a lot of diversity in the discourse. It's far from being perfect yet, but I think it's the kind of field that is waking up STEM all across the globe, and it's making us collaborate in completely different ways compared to the past. And this is only going to pay off, in science in general, not only in AI. So it's going to have a positive carryover across all STEM.
Excellent. Thanks you, Max.
My optimistic prediction for the next 3 years is a huge boom for what I call loyal AI. And let me explain what I mean by that. So AI can either have the effect of making power ever more concentrated and ever fewer hands, where it's used to manipulate and control everybody else, or it can have the opposite effect of empowering the individual to see through all the bullshit manipulation attempts and see through when people are trying to scam you, etc. But if you have some sort of personal assistant of 3 years from now, maybe that you bought from Bending Spoons or some other company, you ask yourself this question: who is this really loyal to? If you have a navigation system and every time you're hungry, it randomly drives you past McDonald's on the way to where you're supposed to go, you're going to be suspecting that it's actually loyal to the company that you bought it to, and they got paid by McDonald's to send you on detours, right? Once one company really pushes this idea that here is something we can prove to you is loyal to you, not to us, and they will make money by selling this, and I think they will have a huge competitive advantage, people knowing that this thing is loyal to me, it empowers me. And as more and more products become loyal to the people who buy them, this will start empowering the people more and more to be more effective in their lives and to be harder to manipulate and control. And I think ultimately this would be a huge win for democracy itself in the sense that society will treat people better, people will be better off because these people actually have influence now.
I love that, loyal AI, I'll remember that. Luigi.
Okay, my positive point is that we have all gone through difficult years with the pandemic, and so what has happened, and with the pandemic we have seen how important science is, because the vaccine was developed in astonishingly rapid time, something that did not happen in the past. So what I'm seeing is more and more students that are willing to apply AI to medical problems for the good, for health, for drug discovery. If I had to start again, I would work in this field. But
Really?
maybe I could do like you did. But this is, for me, the most exciting area, because it has really, I see that as the potential to have an impact on society, on the world, for the good of everyone, so much better than the things I do, stereo matching and things like that. So seeing all these students that want to work on AI for, let's say, in general health, I'm positive, because I think that many great discoveries can happen, because they are talented and bright, and the future is in their hands. And I think that if they want to apply their minds on that topic, it will be for the good of everyone.
Thank you. And last, and closing out the day for us, Federico, what do you say?
I don't know, like, for me, I wish like that with AI being more accessible, it's gonna level up a bit the disparities from, small things like being able to capture awesome picture, even if you don't have like an expensive phone, but even connected with each other, even if you don't know English, for example, because like NLP, whatever, AI chatbot can help you that. So I'm not sure I believe that, but I want to think so.